Bock. I'm also the quality assurance manager at Bose. I want to introduce our
resident chef.
guest of honor tonight, Chef Bruce. Bruce is going to be taking us through a
Culinary
whole food and beer pairing, teaching us a lot about how you can pair beer and food. Very same way you can pair wine with beer. Or beer? Wine with beer. Oh. It's too hot. Wine with beer. Bruce is a huge advocate of the local food and local beer movement. He's taught culinary classes at Algonquin College, Mary Joseph Farms, Urban Element. He is a wealth of knowledge. And Bruce and I once we drove together from Vancouver Hill to Philadelphia and back, and we didn't stop talking the entire time. It was awesome. So with that, I'll let Bruce get started. Welcome, Chef Bruce.
I was jumping.
Thank you. It's great to be back again. It's a beautiful, beautiful day out there.
Yeah.
I think Lee has been enjoying themselves immensely. So tonight we have a bunch of different dishes. I have the enviable job and task. I'm very altruistic. I sacrificed myself for you of tasting all the new beers to see which ones I wanted to use tonight. And I settled on 4 that I like. One that's been out for a while, or has been out before, St. Luke's Verse, which is always one of my favorites. I love the Gruit series. We're also going to use Spice Principle, which is a really interesting beer, and it's really interesting flavors. And we have the full-time IPA, which is also great and super food friendly. And then for dessert, we have Cherry Stout, strong green Cherry Stout. So I love matching stout and chocolate. And those are lined up left to right. And the food will be starting at 12 o'clock.
No, it was
around from the meat to the curry to the meatball to the brownies. So, and what I advocate is that you take a bite of the food, take a sip of the beer, and then take a bite of the food and take a sip of the beer together, and get it on your palate at the same time. You get a really good concept of how the food and the beer match. Because, not unlike a good marriage, one should always enhance the other. So the beer should bring out flavors in the food, and the food should bring out flavors in the beer, and neither should overpower. We did when the DOA came out, which was a great beer. It was a huge beer. We put it up against a really beautiful grilled ribeye steak, which was lovely. But if you put that up against, say, St. Luke's Verse, the St. Luke's would disappear. So you want to be sort of matching. One of the keys for me the first things I do is I match assertive to assertive. So if you have a soft, gentle, lovely beer like the St. Luke's Verse that has subtle flavors, I tend to approach the same thing in food. I'll do poultry or white meats or vegetarian things. If I have a big, huge beer like a stout or like the DOA, I'll go to really richer red meats, stews, braises. What else did I taste yesterday? Sergeant Stripes, which was beautiful, and all I want to do is make baked beans and stuff, a whole bunch of Dutch and smoked sausages.
Yeah.
It's just because you should, but also because it would be really delicious. So to start with, on the top of your plate, what I did was I took one of the things about matching the beer and food that I do as well is, if you just start dumping beer into the dish and to try and bring out the flavor of the beer and the food, you will find that you will overpower the food with the beer taste. So what I started doing was I'd look at the recipe for the beer that Matt had come up with, or that anybody had come up with, and I would deconstruct it, and I would start using the bits and pieces in the beer in the recipe. So for this recipe for the beef, what I do is I make a brine with St. Luke's, but I also add lavender, bog myrtle, rosemary, thyme to really pronounce those flavors, garlic, and then I brine the beef for 9 days. Yeah. Patience is a virtue. And then after 9 days, I poach the beer overnight in more of the beer and some aromatics, garlic, onion, celery, that sort of thing, and then slice it thinly. And the meat, really interestingly, comes out tasting like the beer. I have questions.
How did you land on 9 days? Like, why not more? Why not?
There's when you're curing any meat, it takes X amount of time for the cure to penetrate and flavor the meat. So in this case, it takes about 9 days for this to happen. When I make my own homemade pancetta, I brine it for 14 days because it takes that long for the cure to get into the center of the meat. I cured a prosciutto on salt spring for 2 years.
What?
Oh, it was good. It was like eating pig flavored butter. And I knew the pig, so it was even better.
Oh, memories, memories.
And you should. Try the beef and try it with the beer, and then just have a look at what you think it's going to taste like. And Bill is going to speak to the beer a bit.
And you said beer, food, beer, right?
Beer, food, beer and food together.
Hopefully nobody screwed that up.
Yeah, I did.
It's not one of the 10 Commandments. So you'll find it in the flavors. And the other thing that's really important, and this is sort of an aside when you're eating and drinking, is that things really need to be at the right temperature.
You can taste the.
For instance, a lot of people drink wine and beer way too cold. And so you don't get the flavors. It's all kind of dumb, and you can't get flavors from it.
It's like,
food at room temperature is fantastic.
like
If it's too hot temperature-wise, you get no flavor from it. If it's too cold, you get no flavor from it. I like a lot of foods just above room temperature. The beef at this temperature, I think is wonderful. And it makes great sandwiches. Like, that's the thing about this recipe, is you're gonna cook a whole brisket. You're gonna have a ton of meat left over. It makes great Reubens and dinners and all sorts of things. So it's good to have for leftovers.
And that's absolutely right. At the brewery, we do a daily tasting panel to make sure all the beer in our bright beer tanks. That's where the beer is stored right before packaging. We're doing daily testing on that beer to make sure there's no major defects before it goes into the bottle or the keg. And I like to give it half an hour after we pour it, because it comes out of the bright tank really cold, like 1 degree Celsius. But if you drink it at that temperature, like Bruce mentioned, you're going to miss a lot of those flavors because they're not volatilized quite the same. So we have a question.
Yeah, hi, Chef Bruce.
Hi.
First of all, being British, I fully endorse your idea that beer should be drunk a little warmer.
Yeah. Thank you.
The beef, is that grass-fed beef?
It's not grass-fed beef, but it's a particularly lean brisket. It's from a farm called Enright Farms, almost over to Tweed, and it's quite lovely. It's pastured beef, but it's finished. It's also finished as well, so it's sort of half and half.
Plenty.
Yeah. Grass-fed, the question was about grass-fed beef, if anybody didn't hear. And grass-fed beef is wonderful, but you have to be cows don't want to eat corn. They don't. And putting cows in a feedlot and finishing them on corn is a really stupid idea. It makes them fat, and it gives the meat a certain flavor, but it doesn't give it the flavor you want. Grass-fed beef, where they just pasture and then they're slaughtered, is a much different flavor profile. But the only caveat, as it were, is that the beef is leaner, so you have to be a little more careful with the way you're cooking it.
So yeah, Bruce mentioned the beer is St. Luke's First. If you've never had it before, the first time you drink it, I think it immediately makes you think of roasted turkey at Thanksgiving or something like that.
Yep.
The beer is modeled after a medieval age style called a gruit. Gruit ales are produced historically without hops. Instead, they're spiced with interesting spices. In this case, lavender, rosemary, thyme. I think Bock spots really well there.
And
so you get these really cool aromatic flavors that you would not get in a typical hop.
Yeah, and I love the different flavor profile of the herbs in there. If you make a true mixture, everybody sees these packages of herb de Provence, which is usually just like thyme, rosemary, parsley, and that's nonsense. True herb de Provence also has savory, lavender, and other things in it, and it's used a lot for meats like lamb, because especially with lamb, that lavender gives it a beautiful floral overtone that I really like. You need to have a little caution when you're using lavender in your cooking, because because if you use too much, your food is going to taste like your grandma smells. That's not a good thing. So just throw a little caution in when you're using the lavender. Less is better.
So I have a question. Is this one of, as far as the Beau's lineup goes, is this one of the easier beers to cook with, given the rosemary and the thyme?
This is a really lovely beer to cook with because it's so food friendly because of the flavor profile. So there's lots of things you can do with it. And another thing I often do when I'm pairing food and beer is I think sometimes some of the beers remind me of particular wines. And this beer in particular reminds me of wine from a chunk of northern France called Alsace, which is up on the German border. And it reminds me of a wine called Gewürztraminer, which has a really nice spicy floral overtone as well. And another thing that I like to make with this beer that's really good is called tarte flambée. You just take a pizza crust or puff pastry and smear it with whipped goat cheese, caramelized onions, and bacon.
Oh my
fresh thyme. Yeah, it's not hardship. And then you go home and do it tonight. If you're still sober. It's awesome.
One thing I would recommend when your glass or your cup gets maybe half empty, just give it a little swirl. Put your
Empty
hand
or half full?
Half full. Half full. Put your hand over the top for a second or two, and then put your nose right in. You'll get a lot more of the aroma of the beer, and not just for this beer, for all four.
And that brings up another point too, is that I'm sure you've all seen on the bottles, a lot of the bottles on the back have a recommended glassware. And it does make a difference what the glass is. And like as with tasting wine, when you taste the beer, one of the first things you want to do, and it seems counterintuitive because you don't want to lose the lovely effervescence of the beer, but is to give it a good swirl and stick your nose right in there and really get a snootful of the aromatics before you take a sip. And then take the first sip and then wash it around your palate. But really get a good snootful of the aromatics first, and as the gentleman pointed out, the English gentleman, fourth row back, you won't get that if it's too cold. It won't smell like anything at all. So the next thing you have, the next beer that I tried and I really, really liked was the Spice Principle. How many people have tried it so far? It's a really, really cool beer. It's a Hefeweizen, which I really love because that yeast strain that's used in making that beer already has some overtones that I really love. All those banana, tropical fruit esters. You get clove out of it.
I can't read it.
And I love those different flavors. And then what they did was they banged in a whole bunch of curry spices. So again, what I did, is I made a curry powder out of the same spices that they used in the beer. And you should be doing that anyways. Anytime you're making curry, there is no one ubiquitous curry powder. There's no all-purpose curry powder. If you make a shrimp curry, it's a whole different spice mixture than if you make a chicken curry or a whatever curry. It's all different stuff. And sometimes you use whole spices, and sometimes you toast them and grind them. So in this case, what I did was I bought the spices whole, toasted them, ground them, and made the curry with that. And this curry has, again, to go with those tropical and slightly very floral notes, which can sometimes read as sweet. There's squash and sweet potato in there, tofu, chickpeas, coconut milk. Yeah. And it should balance nicely with the beer because they said the two flavors go together. So what I try and do when I'm pairing is to pick particular flavors out of the beer and find that flavor in a food. When the old Scowl came out, it reminded me very much of an old, funky, old world Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
Really leathery, under the saddle, yummy stuff. And so I paired it with duck, and it went beautifully. So that's your second dish, and Bill can speak to the beer.
Yeah, it's when you drink the beer, there's a bit of an underlying heat. So it's not your basic. Well, you do get your basic Hefeweizen wheat beer flavor. Hefeweizen yeast is used to make these German wheat ales. You get banana, you get cloves, that kind of flavor and aroma from the beer. And what ties the base beer together with the added spice, the curry, I think is that clove. I don't know, I said this yesterday, when I first tried this beer,
curry, you always serve it with side dishes, and sides are almost my favorite. The chutneys, the relishes, the raitas, and all that kind of stuff. So underneath that curry was a little bit of chutney. But another thing you could do would be to make a nice chicken curry with the same spice mixture, and then for the top of the throw on top of the curry, throw some bananas in a pan and some coconut oil, and get them bubbling nicely. Splash in a bit of rum and curry powder, and then throw in some coconut. And just whirl that around, and then put the banana coconut mixture on top of your curry. With this beer, it would be spectacular. Fried bananas are great anyways. Bananas Foster is still one of the great things. I miss the old days in restaurants when they used to roll up to the table and the really cheesy waiter in the 70s tuxedo made stuff at the side of the table. It was awesome. Cherry Jubilee, Crepe Suzette, Steak Anne, all that kind of stuff. It was awesome. Real Caesar. Oh yeah, no, it was great.
Is there anyone who didn't think they'd like the curry and sweet beer, but actually really, really liked it? Or did everybody just think they'd like it and they do like it?
Do you not like it? Yeah, you do. Awesome. And again, I've done a lot of food and wine matching in my life, and sometimes when you taste particular wines, people will say, I don't like this wine. My partner does it sometimes, and they'll say, I don't like this wine, it's too this or too that. The thing is that not everything is meant to be just sipped on its own. Sometimes, some lug trip, I can sit out in the lawn chair and I can drink it until I fall out of that lawn chair. And I have done that, and it's awesome on more than one occasion, and that's wonderful. But some beers are so big and assertive, like some wines, that they need to be paired with foods. And they're not exactly fantastic just on their own. So to pair them with something, then they come to life. And then people will say, wow, this is really wonderful. And conversely, some foods really need good beer. The curries and things like that. And darker, richer beers, not just a lager, but something really much more interesting and much more flavorful. Getting off topic, and I might get thrown off the fairgrounds for saying this, but another beautiful match for curry is very counterintuitive. It's an Argentinian Malbec. The next time you make a curry, try it with a Malbec. There's one on the general list, a Chambousquet. It's an organic Malbec, and the big, rich, floral flavors of the red wine match really well with the curry. It's really, really interesting. So, and again, when everybody says, what are you going to drink with curry? You go, I'm going to drink Gewürz, I'm going to drink an off-dry Riesling, or I'm going to drink lager. But no, look for something with more depth of flavor that's as assertive as the curry you're eating.
Love it.
And you'll have more success. And the thing is, we were talking about this last night. Someone said, well, how do you get to know what's good? Well, drink.
Yeah.
And I say that kind of glibly, but the thing is to drink and eat and read and subscribe to a bunch of good food blogs. There's many good books out there. Talk to the brewers, and just experiment and find out what you like and what your palate likes. Not everybody likes the same thing.
And read the label on the bottle too.
Yeah.
A lot of craft breweries will list all of the ingredients that are putting into the beer. And as Bruce said, deconstructing the beer and adding the same core ingredients to your food will help.
Exactly.
Good food and beer.
Yeah.
And it's one of my sort of assertions about cooking when I teach cooking classes and stuff. And I'll get back on topic in a second, but I got to proselytize for a second. I think most people, with all the love and affection in the world, cook backwards. They go to a cookbook or a blog or a magazine, food and drink or whatever, and see a recipe and think, oh, I love that recipe. I'm going to go up tonight and cook it. And you go to the store, and half the ingredients aren't there. So, aside from your partner, the next best relationship you want to make is with your fishmonger, your vegetable grower, your farmer's market, your butcher. And when you go there, you go to the butcher and you say, what in your counter would you take home for dinner tonight? And he says, that steak, or that piece of fish. And then you go to the vegetable guy and say, what's right? What do I need to eat today? Take these tomatoes home and take this basil home. Then when you get home, hopefully you've got a well-stocked pantry, Parmesan, tomato sauce in the freezer, vinegars, oils. Instead of looking in the front of your cookbook for a recipe, flip over to the index and look at the ingredients that you brought home. And I guarantee there'll be a recipe using those ingredients. and it's gonna help you to eat seasonally and locally and with the best thing you can find. We go to, I do it too. I shop sometimes in big box stores and stuff because I need certain prices and I need certain quantities of things. But for special occasions, for family and stuff, I try to shop in smaller stores where I know the people and I can talk to them. And I got some scallops a week ago in a store on Wellington, and they were mind-boggling. They were as big as the palm of my hand, and they were extraordinary. And there's so many things you can do with them. So you flip into your book and you go scallops. Well, it's 400 degrees out today. So what I would do is I would take those scallops and slice them in 3, throw them in a bowl with some chilies and beer and oil and salt and pepper, and let them sit and then eat them raw. Oh, yeah. How many people had Buenos Dias? We did a scallops ceviche with the Buenos Dias. It was, you tried it, didn't you? Try it? It was really good. It was
good to me.
So I don't. Well, you can eat scallops. You put some citrus juice in there too to kind of cook it up, and it's good. So, so now our next dish, we have the full-time IPA, which is a fairly big, assertive beer. And this is another point, when if you're doing a beer tasting at home or doing a beer dinner at home, as with wine, you're always going light to heavy. So you start off with the lighter stuff, move through the medium weight to the heavyweight, and then on to something for dessert. So with this IPA, which is really flavorful and has a slightly bitter edge, for one thing I find it pairs really well with mint. It's lovely with mint and it's lovely with meat. So I made a lamb meatball with some samalulak and harissa and other odds and ends in it. And then underneath it, just because this is the kind of fun you should get up to once in a while, I took an entire bottle of IPA, dumped it into a pot with some sugar, some malt from the IPA, some spices, some chilies, some mustard seeds, and a little bit of vinegar. Brought that to a boil and boiled it down until it was syrupy, and then folded in about 5 pureed red onions and some garlic. And so you get that sweet, sour, onion relish thing going on with the meatball, which I think is a really good combination.
That's awesome. That it gives me
Get every drop of that shit.
Yeah, bitter meat. Yeah.
really good.
And again, the lamb is from a local farm, Chantal, the Bergerie de Sable over in Turin. She makes great lamb. I think I may have met this lamb. Yeah. Did somebody have a question? No? Okay. Awesome. And how are the matchings so far? We're finding them pretty much compatible? Good. It's awesome. You can speak to the beer a little bit.
I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the full-time IPA, but full-time IPA was released by Bock earlier this year. It's a West Coast style IPA, so it's got it's a fairly dry, but it's got a lot of big tropical fruit flavors, pineapple, mango, that kind of thing. But very piney at the same time. It's about 6.7% alcohol. And around 60 IBUs, so there's a good amount of bitterness in this beer, which is important when you're pairing it with this dish because it stands out well to that heat and the other spices.
And it has that resiny edge. You know, how many people drink Retsina without being forced to? Retsina, or that resiny stuff, that rosemary is beautiful with lamb. When I do these lamb meatballs at home, what I like to do is to skewer them, get rosemary branches about that long, and put about 3 lamb meatballs on a rosemary branch and put that on the barbecue. And then it gets even more of that rosemary flavor in there as they cook. And they're really quite delicious. So it's lots of fun to do.
Cool.
So that's 3 of our dishes. We're sort of smoking through them here, but I know there's places we'd like to be.
I do have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned reverse, kind of the way people find recipes.
Yeah.
Is in reverse. They go online, they find a recipe they like, and then they go to the grocery store and buy the shit. How many cookbooks or that kind of thing are out there for beer-based dishes? Pairing beer with food.
There are becoming more and more cookbooks matching beer and food. There's a beer writer named Stephen Beaumont who does a lot of it, and the Brooklyn Brewery has a beer and food book out that's really, really good. And And then there's a number of good websites that do them. Morella,
You know what you're doing when you just put the beers out.
has a really good blog. There's a few really good. Yeah. There's a lot of really good blogs out there that talk about matching beer and food as well. And then the other thing is that there's more and more cookbooks as they're being written actually speak to seasons. So as opposed to having a section on appetizers, main course, dessert, they have July, August, September, whatever. So you can know what to cook at what time of the year. And even at home, I have a file folder system of hanging file folders, and I tear recipes out of magazines. I throw them in the appropriate month. And so when I'm writing menus and stuff, and I'm going to I do pinch recipes. I do take ideas out of recipes. I go to that month and flip through it. Or go to somewhere like Foodland, Ontario. What's in season? What am I going to do? So it's and it helps you to cook, as I say, in season. You're going to get the best flavors that way too. You know. You eat stuff out of season that doesn't taste right. If you eat asparagus right now, go to the grocery store and buy asparagus, it tastes like hell. It's awful. It's from Peru or somewhere. It's awful. But when asparagus comes in the spring, it's sexy. It's the first green thing you eat. It's got that beautiful flavor to it. Eat yourself stupid on it for 3 or 4 weeks, and then move on to the next thing. And it's exciting that way. It's more anticipation, you know. Remember your first date was right in 10, you didn't get the 4th base right away. It took a while. In theory, I guess somebody did, but
a good asparagus beer.
Yeah, when we did the Saison was really good for the asparagus, and there was another one, and I'm having a brain freeze right now. But we had a recipe on the website for asparagus. I would even take the St. Luke's, and in season, I would take asparagus, throw it into a bowl with salt, pepper, a bit of balsamic, roll it up in prosciutto and throw it on the barbecue.
Woo!
And you're going to get that nice grilled flavor. The green grassy flavors are going to go out with the nice herbs in the beer. So that's a really nice one as well. I tend not to cook very many vegetables with water anymore. Most stuff gets roasted or sauteed. I love all these people, all these chefs, and you say, well, how did you become a chef? And they tell these great romantic stories about, oh, I learned to cook at my grandma's knee, holding onto her apron at the stove, and I learned to cook out of self-defense. My mother had a propensity for overcooking vegetables. Throw broccoli in a pot, and the whole house smells like overcooked broccoli. Put shitty cheddar cheese on it, and you've got broccoli with cheese sauce. So I knew there was something wrong inherently, and then I had a couple of epiphanies along the way that made me go, that was wrong. And I looked at some of the cookbooks I've inherited, and they say things like boil asparagus for 20 minutes. That's heinous. We should be put in prison for that.
Yeah.
Seriously, there should be a food prison.
Yeah.
One other question I have is breakfast overlooked when it comes to pairing beer with food?
Yeah, one more beer at breakfast.
Breakfast is wildly overlooked when pairing beer with food. We automatically go to a mimosa. You know, you go out for brunch, the first thing you think about is a mimosa. Delicious, it's great. But why not have a nice light wheat beer with breakfast?
Yeah.
And, you know, you're going to eat something like pancakes that have bacon and fatty breakfast meats. Pick a nice beer that's going to go with that. The Sergeant Stripes would go really well with certain breakfast foods.
Yeah.
One of my favorite times ever was at a Milestones in the Calgary airport, and it said, come in for breakfast and a beer. I was like, okay.
All right. Twist my rubber arm.
Yeah, good idea to me. But yeah, like think outside the box, and as I say, we think of Prosecco or a light white wine for breakfast. Wheat beer is beautiful. St. Luke's would be beautiful. Make a nice strata with roasted vegetables and goat cheese, and that would go really well with the St. Luke's first. And even think about the sort of Japanese way of making custards, where in Japan they make lots of beautiful custard-based savory dishes, and they put things like stock and fish stock and miso in the broth. Use the beer to make the custard for the strata. So do beer, eggs, herbs, toss that with the bread, the eggs, and then put roasted vegetables and goat cheese and bake that in a layer in a pan. It would be quite delicious. So yeah, it's really, really yummy.
Yeah.
So beer is indeed for breakfast. You heard it here.
Yeah.
You have permission.
Yeah. I get a prescription?
On the subject of beer and breakfast, one more decadent thing. I have a great cross stitch that one of my exes did on the wall in my kitchen, and it says wretched excess is only the beginning. And I think that's a very admirable life thing, an important thing to remember. So, for dessert, what I did was I went to the Tom Green Cherry Stout. I hadn't tried it before, but I really like the Tom Green in general, and the Cherry Stout in particular is really wonderful. So what I did was I made a very rich sort of chocolate pudding cake, and then going with that, what I did was I took a bunch of cherries, dumped in some Tom Green, some sugar, and the malt that's used in the Tom Green, brought that to a boil, let it simmer down, and that's the sauce that's underneath the pudding cake. Do you have a question?
I have a question, it's a bit of a non-sequitur. Because we're all having a good time. I was curious what your hangover cure or dish is.
Grease.
Tomorrow morning. The movie grease or the dish grease?
Like breakfast grease, like bacon, sausages.
No recipe in particular, just straight up grease?
No, I like for me, it was a combination of things like breakfast meats, like bacon and sausage. Not being glib for a second. Bacon, sausages, things like that, and something sort of carbohydrate based. So I wouldn't just eat scrambled eggs and bacon. I would probably have like that strata, or pancakes, or French toast, or that sort of thing.
While you're chewing this,
and Advil.
I did. I don't even need the beer. The beer's not as good. The beer's not as good as...
Fried bologna. Awesome. It's my guilty chef.
Yeah! Loopy steak.
But yeah, when they do a great brunch at Beau's tomorrow morning. One of the things they do that is another good hangover cure is, and I like it very much, it's sort of a European way of having breakfast, is you have a whole bunch of cold meats and cheeses.
Yeah.
So scramble up some eggs, and then you have 3 or 4 different kinds of lovely cold meats, 2 or 3 cheeses, one hard, one rich, one blue, and some really good bread.
Take a bite,
You just
and
sort of
keep the
knock
food there, and then
that.
sip your beer
That's
while you're
a great
chewing.
hangover cure.
Fabulous.
See, medical advice and food and bad jokes.
Can we go try that chocolate cheesecake? Oh,
So, try the brownie with the cherry compote and then take a sip of the beer and see what you think. I think it's pretty good. I like doing beer with dessert. It's kind of fun. We were doing a dinner with Anders once of Kissmeyer fame, and we made a crepe, stuffed it with sweet goat cheese, and the crepe had some oatmeal in it, and then made a syrup with hibiscus, which is in the Kissmeyer. And that was the bridge that held the crepe and the beer together, and it actually went well. Anders was sort of blown away. We actually pulled that
I think I'm
off.
in love with him. I want
think
him to be my best friend.
I know. Come to my house. Use my ingredients.
Yeah. And yes, and this, yeah, and that's a really important point you brought up, Phil. Whenever you're cooking, you want to use the best ingredients you possibly can. If you try cheaping out, your dish will taste like that. If you're using wine in your dish, don't use the stuff you drink out of a brown paper bag on the church steps. Come alive for $1.05.
It's in a box.
If you're not going to drink it, don't cook with it. Because when you're cooking with it, you're usually reducing it in some way, and so all you're doing is concentrating all that nastiness. So what you want to do is cook with things of quality. In this brownie, I bought good quality Belgian chocolate and made the brownie with that. It makes a huge difference. Don't just go and buy a bag of chippets.
This is a milk stout. Does milk chocolate lend itself better or worse to a milk stout than a dark chocolate?
Milk chocolate goes great with the standard Tom Green.
Okay.
As
Yeah.
a very amateur chef who likes good food,
Yeah.
is there something that you can suggest as how can we figure out how to, I mean, you've had some great ideas here that you just throw out because of your years of experience. But for somebody who doesn't have that years of experience, how can you figure out what's going to work together without wasting a ton of money?
There's a few really good books out there. There's a few really, really lovely books out there, and there's a lot of good blogs out there. If you come see me afterwards, I'll give you my card. You send me an email, I'll send you I gave it to you already earlier, that's right. There's a couple of books that like the one I'm thinking of in particular, I've had too much beer today, so I'm having a brain freeze on the title. There's one in particular that in the back of the book has a fantastic appendix, and it goes, you know, this curved pine goes with this and this and this. Duck breast goes with this and this and this. And that is almost enough to guide you. And there's another, it's a professional book, but it's kind of fun in a way because you look up, in classic French cooking, there's sauces, and you have what are called the mother sauces. And so you have 5 basic sauces, and from there everything else derives. So you have hollandaise sauce. And if you add blood orange juice to that, you have Maltese sauce. If you add other things to it, it becomes different things. This book, for professional chefs, just says Maltese sauce is hollandaise with blood oranges. But when you read through it and look at it, it's good. It's also divided up by, this is what goes with shrimp, this is what goes with sole, this is what goes with... So those are the sorts of books that you want to be looking for. But there's so many really great blogs right now. I read Smitten Kitchen, Food 52, the King Arthur Flour website is really good. So there's a lot of good websites out there too. And King Arthur Flour, just as an aside, is also a B Corp like Beau's. Question. Yeah.
Question back.
Hi. So the lentil was great. I really like the vegetable curry and stuff like that, but it was still rather sweet. So for something that's like really, really spicy, and I know I like really spicy curry,
Yeah.
so you're like sweating. I've yet to find like a beer that pairs really well with that. So what type of beer would you suggest would go with like really spicy curry? Where
Just
it's,
for
like,
fun, try something dark. Try it like, and what I might even do, and this is sacrilege to some brewers, but what I might even do is try something like a snake bite, where I would take like the Tom Green milk stout and put in about a third cider and try that with your curry. So it takes a little bit of the edge off the stout, and like I was saying about the Malbec and the curry, even with hot curries, that's really, really lovely. Or I would also try quite a high IPA and see what that does for you.
Excellent. I will try a snake bite.
Yeah.
What about with Thanksgiving coming up?
Thanksgiving, well,
Turkeys and St. Luke's verse
Yeah.
seems like a natural match.
it is. St. Luke's is a great match for Thanksgiving, and as with wine, there's always a sort of a divergency of opinion. Even though the turkey is allegedly white meat, it's also roasted, which gives it a whole different flavor profile. So do you go with white wine or red wine? If I was gonna go with like a lighter, like a beer, I would probably go with St. Luke's. Would be really quite fantastic. I might even go in a weird direction, depending on the spicing of your food, the spicing of your gravy and stuff. The Kissmeyer would work too.
Yeah.
Because of that flavor profile and that herby finish to it. It's I love Kissmeyer with food. I love Kissmeyer with smoked fish. Get yourself some make a nice smoked fish platter, and grab like smoked salmon and roll herrings and things, and try that with Kissmeyer. Quite delicious.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? No? I guess not.
Very well behaved.
Okay, well, thank you guys very much for coming.